I always joke that having a Cannonball record, it's like that and $5 will get you a beer at happy hour. It's not really good for much. But in this instance, there was lobster rolls. So car shows are just car shows usually, but then there's other car shows called concours or concours d'elegance. Can't pronounce French stuff, so I try not to talk about citrons very much. They're on a whole nother level. Typically very fancy. Every car is invited. They have classes that they've planned years in advance. They know what cars are going to be there. They know what people are going to be there. It's very much a who's who of the greatest collectors on the planet and their cars. So I, in no way, am eligible to ever bring a car to any of these events, mostly because mine are almost as dirty as Ed Bullion's, and I can't be bothered to wash my car for a car show. But I very much enjoy attending the events because it's just a little bit better than your local hot rod and Corvette cruise in, where people put placards up about how rare their not rare red Corvette is. One of my new favorite events is the Audrain Concours in Newport, Rhode Island. And it's only been going on a couple years, but Donald Osborne and Jay Leno have really put this thing on the map and done a great job with it. And it helps that the setting is idyllic. I mean, I'm a New Englander. There's nothing like the New England coast, and having gathering of some of the greatest cars in the world against that backdrop is second to none. Well, I guess second to Monterey, but anyway, it's great. The best way to do a car show is not to just go, but you have to do it right. You got to go to the right events. That's why I think some of these smaller concours are better, like Amelia and Newport, because you go to Monterey and it's like you have to book years in advance. You have to know people. You have to be somebody to even scratch the surface of what's going on. But you can go to Audrain or Amelia and you can experience just about everything. And part of the fun of that is experiencing it with friends. So we found that the best way is to rent a house, get a bunch of people there, and take fun cars, have dinners together, and just make it an experience. Included in that is bringing along the wives sometimes. And that's where the story gets a little bit interesting. So we are at the day of the Concours in Newport. And first of all, it had rained the night before. I mean, it had poured. So, of course, they have to get all these priceless cars out onto the grass. And I'm talking with one of the guys overseeing this whole thing. And they had to build this road out of plywood to get the cars in. And he said they spent something like $100,000 on plywood to build this thing in the middle of the night just so they could get these cars in without it being the most expensive mud run in history. What was cool though is the day before where they did the tour, which, always happens before concours. Every car in the show is invited to go on this driving tour escorted by the police, which we accidentally got in the middle of because we didn't see them making a turn or whatever, and the cop wasn't there. So we're like in the middle of this closed tour for a minute, going extremely slowly, as most police escorted drives do. But anyway, they were all out there in the pouring rain, and these cars don't have air conditioning. A lot of them don't have working windows. Some of them don't have tops. Guy pulled up in an original Ford GT40 with a door open that he was basically just fanning to get some sort of defrost, and he's wiping down the inside of the windshield. So it's great to see the owners of these priceless cars out driving them in comparison to the guy who thinks he has a priceless rare Corvette, who's never washed it with water because it's never seen rain, yada, yada, yada. Get to the show, and the sun finally comes out and it warms up a little bit. And we're walking around, and Jay Leno's there, which is a real treat to see. And one of my friends came up with an idea that we should do a photo competition at the Concours because we had all procured media passes through our good contact Ben at Audrain. So he's like, hey, let's all buy disposable cameras. So we only get 24 or 27 pictures, however many is on the roll, and we'll have categories. And then after the event, we'll judge these photos and see who wins each category. So I went up to Jay Leno with my media pass and my disposable camera and said, hey, Jay, can I get a selfie with you? So he took a selfie with the disposable camera, click. As you forward the film, he looks at it and he goes, "What kind of a phone is that?" Now, in hindsight, had I been quicker on my feet, I would have said it's a rotary phone, but I didn't think of that till later. Anyway, but it was just fun messing with people because some of my friends would go around and people would be looking at a car and they come up and just flash their media badge. Excuse me, media, please get out of the way. And then click. So they got a lot of funny looks and we just had a ball with it. Part of the fun of these things is not taking yourselves too seriously. On that note, we're looking around for food and drinks, and of course, they're very expensive at these types of events. And I text my wife, and she's like, "Oh, hey, we found this tent where it's free drinks and free food." We're like, "Really?" Because we don't even have access to the VIP tent, so I don't know what you're talking about. And the media tent was like some Ritz crackers and a folding table. So we're like, "Oh, okay, where are you?" And we went to the tent, and she thought it was Club Audrain, but that was the sign next to it. It was actually the Bank of America private banking VIP tent. But there was food there, nobody was there. The bartender kept giving us refills, and nobody told us to leave. So we're like, okay, I guess we're allowed to be here. The people actually working the B of A tent came back and they're talking to us. Everything's fine. At any point, I'm like, man, we're going to get asked to leave because we're definitely like, I don't even bank with Bank of America and I don't even know what private banking is. All right, cool. Well, we'll just hang out and keep getting refills until we can't. And then they brought the lobster rolls in. Now, good New England lobster is second to none, and it was fresh. So I go over for the lobster roll, and that's when we get stopped. And the guy goes, excuse me, are you guys with Bank of America? I'm like, nope. He's like, well, you guys can't be in here. I'm like, shoot. The jig is up. So we just like we're friendly with him. We get talking, and he's like, "Oh, well, you can stay around for a little bit, but you can't have the lobster rolls because it's a very limited supply, and it's only for people on the list." And I'm like, "All right, fine, fine." And meanwhile, his cohort is stiff arming people as they come in, asking them super awkwardly if they're on the list, and if they're private banking clients, et cetera, et cetera. And people are just getting annoyed that they can't come in. They're like, "Well, I own shares in Bank of America, or I do this, or I do that, or I bank with you guys." And they're like, "Well, but you're not on the list." And this poor guy is turning all these people away, and he's hating his job, and these people are getting annoyed, and we're just sitting there. And finally, they're like, "All right, you guys got to go." Now, despite what my critics might say, I am not one to advertise Cannonball or like introduce myself and say, "Hey, do you know anything about Cannonball?" Right? I'm not that guy. I was wearing a bright red Cannonball jacket that you could not miss, but I always joke that having a Cannonball record, it's like that and $5 will get you a beer at happy hour. It's not really good for much. But in this instance, there was lobster rolls and rejection. And we're about to get disconnected from any possibility of having lobster rolls. And so at the last possible moment when we're getting escorted out of the tent, I just looked at the guy. I'm like, "Hey, do you know anything about Cannonball?" He's like, I thought I recognized you. Yeah, you have the Cannonball record." I'm like, "Yeah. Does that get us lobster rolls?" He's like, "Heck yeah, you guys can stay." And he's like asking me all about the Cannonball record and like telling his friend about it. And there's like 10 of us, right? So they're all riding on the Cannonball coattails. And we get to hang out in the B of A private banking tent. And I was like, yes, Cannonball is finally good for something. It got us lobster rolls. I felt a little bit cheap selling myself like that, but whatever. Lobster rolls. Finally, they're like tired of being in the tent working it. So they're like, "Hey, we want to go look at the cars. Can you guys like watch the tent for us?" I'm like, "Sure." So I took off my red Cannonball jacket and I had a nice velvet blazer on underneath, which is the type of thing you're supposed to wear. Not velvet, I don't know, some fancy material that my wife bought online. It was purple and plaid and whatever, but very, very classy, more classy than a bright red Cannonball jacket, proper for a Concours. for the next hour, because they took a long time touring the show, I got to stand outside the Bank of America tent and be security for them. Except I had no freaking clue who was on the list or anything. But it was great because all I had to do was just ask people, "Are you on the list?" And they would just say, "What list?" "Okay, you're not." So it was way less awkward than the other guy was trying to do, because I didn't ask about private banking or anything. I'm just like, "Are you on the list?" And they would be honest. "No, I'm not." And every now and then somebody would try to like sneak by me and get coffee. And I'm like, you're not on the list." And every now and then, I think there was 2 employees that I stiff armed and said, "You're not on the list." So, "Well, I work for B of A. I'm supposed to be here." I'm like, "Cool, I don't." Temporary employee. So yeah, that's how to do a concourse. Sneak into a private banking tent and then get hired to run security, all for payment of lobster rolls. I thought that this kind of shenanigans would not be well received and we would not be asked back to Audrain, but thankfully they all thought it was absolutely hilarious. That's why the event is good, is they all have a sense of humor. And to illustrate their sense of humor, they asked me to be a judge this year at the show, which apparently some committee members asked why I was a judge, and I had the exact same questions. My list of qualifications are not that high besides being a used car dealer. But the moral of the story is, I guess if you break a cannonball record, it's good for a few lobster rolls.
Right now, I want you to click the link in the description below to find your next car on AutoTempest. Whatever it is you're looking for, AutoTempest is the most powerful way to shop for your next car. They compile all the results from all the major listing sites into one place, and now they've got a new feature that I love. You can see all of the historical price changes that a car has had since it first showed up for sale online. That gives me more power to be an even shrewder negotiator, understanding exactly how desperate the seller probably is to get rid of this car. So check them out now at the link in the description below to thank them for their ongoing support of VINwiki and find your next car on AutoTempest.